Geronimo Stilton, Classic Tales, Around the World in 80 Days, read by Hosea Tongho. Around the World in 80 Days. Who is Phileas Fogg? It all started with a cold bit. On a cold and foggy London evening in 1872, one magnificent mouse claimed that he could travel around the world in only 80 days. But who could even imagine that such a fabulous feat was possible? And what rodent could have been brave enough to attempt such an enormous challenge? Phileas Fogg, that's who. You might guess that Phileas Fogg was a fierce adventurer, but no. Fogg was a calm, gentle mouse who loved his habits and routines. He had travelled a little bit as a young mouser, but he hadn't left London in years. Now he only travelled from his house at 7 Savile Row to the Reform Club for daily games of cards with his friends, engineer Andrew Stewart, banker Samuel Falconet, and John Sullivan, brewer Thomas Flagnan, and director of the Bank of London, Gotha Ralph. Aside from this daily trip, hardly anyone knew about the quiet and mysterious life of Phileas Fogg. Fogg was perfectly happy to keep himself. He didn't go to the theatre, never did go horse racing, and didn't want a cheese crumb of anything to do with politics. He wasn't married, and he didn't have any mouses of his own. No one had ever seen him lose his temper or patience, and nothing ever seemed to bother him or put his tail in a twist. It was quite a marvellous feat. Phileas Fogg's days were always the same, perfectly organized. Every day he left his house at 11:30 in the morning, headed to the Reform Club, and came home at midnight on the dot. He ordered lunch and dinner inside the historic club, and always at the same time, at the same table. Everything was the same, day after day. Fogg was too fond of his fur to deal with anything unexpected. But the mice who paid the price for Fogg's strict routine was his servants. He didn't intend to be a mean boss, but he did insist that everything happened on time and in perfect order. Fogg's last butler, James Forster, had carefully prepared the shaving water for Mr. Fogg's one day, but he had made it 2 degrees cooler than what Fogg wanted, so Fogg had fired it. Holy cheese! Phileas Fogg was strict. On the same day, James Forster was fired. A new butler arrived to take his place. And when the doorbell rang right on time, Phileas Fogg couldn't help but think what the new butler was staring off into the right paw. Passepartout kicked up his paws. As soon as he opened the heavy wooden doors, James Forster found himself snout to snout with a young rodent with kind eyes. He was dressed simply, but he wore a funny pair of red shoes. "Come right in, Mr. Fogg is waiting for you," said James, looking at the new butler over from the snout to its tail. Then he lowered his voice and added, "Good luck." The new butler introduced himself to Phileas Fogg. "My name is Jean, but everyone calls me Passepartout." Then he added proudly, "I'm French." "I guess that from your accent, and from your very unusual shoes," Fogg said, pointing at the butler's paws. "That type of shoes is only made in France." Passepartout looked at his future boss, impressed. "I'd be very happy to work for you," he said. Then, with a grin, he added, "And I'm sure you won't regret hiring me either." "Why do you say that?" Fogg asked, narrowing his eyes. This young rodent seemed very sure of himself, and very nice, when Fogg wasn't. "I heard that ye led a calm life, full of routine," Passepartout said, "and ye hate travel and parties." "That's true," Fogg replied with a nod. "I've led an exciting life so far," Passepartout went on. "I've had all sorts of different jobs. I was a circus acrobat, a fire mouse, even a gymnast teacher. I travelled all over the world. It was fabulous, but now I'm looking to settle down with a calm and secure job." "So that's why you're here?" Fogg asked. "Yes," Passepartout thought for a second. "Oh, one more thing. I pride myself on precision and punctuality." "Don't squeak another word. You're hired," Fogg declared on the spot. Glancing at the clock on the wall, Fogg asked, "What time does your watch say now?" 11:22, the new butler responded confidently. Fogg scratched his snout. Your watch is 4 minutes late. With all due respect, sir." "That's impossible," Passepartout squeaked. "My watch is very precise." "I think you're wrong, but that's okay," Fogg said calmly. "You're still hired." With that, he got up, grabbed his hat and gloves, and headed for the door. "I'm going to the Reform Club now. I won't be back until midnight." As he closed the door behind him, he added, "The room is on the 2nd floor." Suddenly, Passepartout found himself alone in the enormous house on Savile Row. He looked around, satisfied, then grabbed his suitcase and went upstairs. His room was warm and welcoming. "Oh, I could get used to this place," he squeaked with joy as he threw himself into the bed. Above the fireplace he noticed a strange painting on a stir frame. Passepartout got his paws to a closer look and realized it wasn't a painting at all. It was a daily schedule Fogg had left for him. "Thundering cattails! Mr. Fogg is just the boss I've been looking for," he cried with a smile. The club, the cards, and the thief. When Phileas Fogg reached the Reform Club, he sat at his usual table and waited for his lunch to be served. After eating, he calmly settled into a comfortable chair. A crackle fire burned in the fireplace, and the wooden shelves were full of books, and fluffy red carpet made the place cozy and welcoming. It was the perfect spot for Fogg to read the daily newspaper in peace and quiet. Little by little, more and more rodents trickled in. Soon the porches were all full, but Fogg didn't seem to notice anything going on around him. He kept reading, seated comfortably in his chair. Eventually, two nearby rodents started a fascinating conversation. One of the mice, Gunther Rolfe, worked at the Bank of London, and the bank had just been robbed. Holy cheese! No one had ever dared to steal from the bank before, since the security was infamously tight. It was unthinkable, but somehow the robber had stolen a cheese load of cash. The thief must have been an expert, squeaked Thomas Flagnan, a brewer business mouse, and one of Fogg's friends. "You can say that again," responded Ralph. "He got away with £55,000. Cheese and crackers. How awful. Only a true rascally rat could have stolen so much." Andrew stood China, upset by what he had overheard. "A really menacing mouse," Flagnan agreed. "You're wrong, friends," a new voice piped up. "In fact, the thief is probably a perfect gentlemouse. The last rodent you expect to do such a thing." The voice came from behind the pages of the Morning Chronicle. It was Phileas Fogg. "That's where it says here anyways," he added with a cool shrug. "And if it's a trustworthy newspaper like the Morning Chronicle reports something, it's probably true." After talking about the robbery for another half hour, they all moved over to the table for a game of cards. Cards were his favorite pastime of many club members, especially Fogg. Cards were the perfect game. He could play for hours without having to squeak a single word. But this day, in between games, the gentlemen continued to talk about the bank robbery. "The thief won't get far," said Gunther Rolfe. "The policemen are checking all the ports so we can't leave London. Or then they'll catch him. The world is so big." Andrew still argued. "Wrong again," Fogg chimed in. The other rodents stared to turn at him with the wide, wondering eyes. "What do you mean?" asked Stuart. "Simple. I mean, the world is not as big as it used to be," responded Fogg. "That's true," Sullivan agreed. "I read that thanks to the opening of the Suez Canal and the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, a rodent can actually travel around the world in just 80 days. "Impossible," the others squeaked. "He's right," Fogg said, holding up a paw. 80 days are more than enough." "Are you serious? What if there are storms, or shipwrecks, or train derailments?" Stuart asked. Fogg responded right away. "I'm as serious as an extra sharp cheddar, Mr. Stuart. In fact, I would make the journey myself." "You must be joking, Fogg," said Valentine. Fogg shook his snout. "No, not at all. You're squeaking nonsense," Stuart said. "I'll bet £4,000 you couldn't finish the journey in time." "Are you joking?" Sullivan cried. "Not even a bit," responded Stuart. "I'd never joke about a bit." "Then it's a deal," said Fogg, "and I raise the stakes. If I win, I get £20,000, and if I lose, I owe you 5 gentlepounds, the same amount. That's half of everything I own." "Don't do anything cheese-brained, Fogg," whispered Valentine. But Fogg's mind was made up. He wouldn't change it now for all the cheese in England. "What do you think, gentlemen?" he asked. "You 5 against me." The others looked around for a few seconds, all scratching their fur thoughtfully. Then Sullivan responded, "We think you're crazier than a rat chasing a wildcat, but we accept." Fogg grinned. Holy cheese! This bet was so far from his usual routine that he'd be surprised everyone by accepting it, even himself. "So, Mr. Fogg," said Stuart, "when do you plan to leave?" "Right now," responded Fogg. "But what about your luggage?" asked Sullivan. "I travel light," replied Fogg calmly. "I can buy everything I need during the trip." An astonished silence fell over the room. Simon Swiss paused. He was serious. Fogg went on. In 1 hour at 8:45, there's a train headed to Dover on the west coast of England. Glancing at the clock near the window, he added, "I'll be on that train." The other gentlemen looked at one another, wild eyes. "Today is October 2nd, 1872, Fogg said. "If my calculations are correct, I'll return in exactly 80 days on Saturday, December 21st at 8:45 in the evening. Ralph and Valentine suggested that they write down all the rules of the bit to make things official. Once everything had signed the paper, Valentine turned to Fogg. "Do you realize that you could lose everything?" he asked. "Just one unexpected mishap could ruin your whole trip. You'd be left without a cheese crumb," added Ralph. Fogg stayed as cool as a cucumber and cream cheese sandwich. "My friend, unexpected doesn't exist." The adventure begins. Passepartout had seen and heard so much of his fabulous life of adventure, but nothing surprised him anymore. But when Fogg arrived home early that night and told him about the bit, the butler was squeakless. "You're going to travel around the world in 80 days? Passepartout inspected Fogg's head for bumps. "I'm going with you." "Holy cheese! Are you sure you didn't hit your head while you were out, sir?" "I'm sure, Passepartout," Fogg responded, calm as ever. "I bet the mice at the Reform Club £20,000 that I could do it." Passepartout dropped into a chair and like a 10-pound wheel of cheese. "Why, my first day of week is definitely more eventful than I expected," he muttered in amazement. Fogg gave him a moment to recover before squeaking. "Now, I need you to get my luggage ready. We'll leave on a train for Dover in less than an hour." "But, sir," poor Passepartout said, "it's impossible to get everything in time." Fogg opened a suitcase and assured him. "Oh, all I need are 2 shirts and a pair of good shoes, and a raincoat." He thought for a moment. "Ah, and I almost forgot my travel blanket. I've never had a reason to use it before." Passepartout didn't have much experience as a butler, but he knew one very important thing: never argue with your boss. Still, he couldn't quite keep timidly. "Still, there's nothing much. There's still this, sir. That doesn't seem like very much to pack for 80 days of travel." "Don't worry," Fogg replied, with a wave of his paw. "We'll buy everything as we go." With that, he slid a few tall stacks of money into the suitcase. "This £20,000 is everything I have left, since I have had to set aside the rest of my money for the bet. I'm trusting you to keep it safe." Passepartout closed the suitcase and lifted it carefully. Rotten Rat's teeth, carrying all that money around, was enough to make his first stand on an end. As he climbed the stairs to his room, he whispered, "So much for a calm, quiet life." A half hour later, at 8:40, Fogg and Passepartout pulled up in front of the Charing Cross train station. Passepartout leaped out of the carriage. "We must hurry," he squeaked, urgently unloading his boss's suitcase. "The train leaves in 5 minutes." "Just a moment, Passepartout," responded Fogg. "First, there's something I need to do." He climbed out the carriage and walked over to a poor mouse who was begging for change in a corner of the station. "Take this, ma'am," said the Fogg, placing a £20 bill in her paw. "I'm happy to admit you. Cheesy cream puffs." The mouse's eyes filled with grateful tears. She was still thanking Fogg as he and Passepartout climbed up the train. Passepartout was squeakless. How generous of his boss. "It's fabulous to work for such a kind rodent," he thought, lifting Fogg's suitcase into the compartment behind him. A few minutes later, the train pulled away from the station. Passepartout sat in a corner with the suitcase between his paws and watched Fogg. The ginger mouse was as calm as always, even as they set off on a marvelous trip around the world. Trouble brewing. Back in London, pandemonium broke out. News of the bet had gotten around the city, and the morning newspaper were packed with articles about Fogg's journey. Of course, rodents were divided into 2 categories: the mice who were rooting for Fogg, and the mice who were rooting. He was sure that his trip would be a most terrific flop. The news mice who sold the papers on the street yelled the headlines: "Phileas Fogg, Daredevil," and "Fogg's Epic Adventure." But some of the headlines about the travel mouse weren't so nice, like "Phileas Fogg, Total Cheese Brain." Curious rodents discussed the bet everywhere they went, in clubs, theatres, and markets. Many of them even placed bets of their own, as if they were at their racetrack. Cheese and crackers, what a commotion! Fogg had already begun his trip, so he didn't have any idea what was happening back in London. Unfortunately, he had no idea about the breaking news that could ruin his trip entirely. That day, a telegram arrived at police headquarters in London from Suez, Egypt. It read, "Awaiting Phileas Fogg, rodent who robbed the Bank of London. Stop. Send warrant for arrest immediately. Stop." The telegram was signed by Detective Fix. How was this possible? As it turned out, some of the bank robbery witness had given the police a description of the thief. Coincidentally, The description matched the photos of Fogg that filled the newspaper around the time of his departure. Double-twisted rat-tails, the rodents of London were suddenly convinced that the mouse who had stolen £55,000 from the Bank of London was none other than the fearless Fogg, and now he was fleeing the country. British inspectors and detectives were sent to all the main ports in Europe and Africa, hoping to stop the thief. Detective Fix waited impatiently in Suez. He had a hunch that Fogg's journey would take him right through Egypt. He could already picture it. He would approach Fogg with handcuffs and arrest him with his warrant. In his toughest voice, Fix would say, "Mr. Fogg, you're under arrest." The very thought of it made him squeak with joy. Unfortunately, Detective Fix's fabulous dreams of glory didn't last long. When the steamship Mongolia arrived in Suez, none of the passengers who got off matched the description given by the London police mice. "Rats," he growled, twisting his hat between his paws. "Fogg is nowhere to be seen, but I'm sure he was on the ship." As he was lost in thought, a rodent moved towards him through the crowd. "Excuse me, sir," the rodent said politely. "My name is Passepartout. Could you tell me where to find the consultant's office? I need them to sign this." He held up his passport. Detective Fix looked at the name on the passport and could barely squeak. The passport belonged to Phileas Fogg. "I'm Phileas Fogg's butler," Passepartout added. Fogg wanted to leave his passport in his sight. Fogg wanted to have his passport signed in each new country he visited as proof of his trip around the world. Fix said, "I'm afraid that your boss must go to the consultant himself." Passepartout nodded and headed back to the ship to find Fogg. Detective Fix ran to the consultant as fast as his paws would take him. "Mr. Consul, a thief will be here in seconds," he panted, out of breath. "Slimy Swiss balls we will have to store until the arrest warrant arrives from London." The consul looked doubtful. "How?" Fix threw up his paws. "Just don't sign his passport no matter what." "That's impossible," the consul insisted. "If the passport is legal, I'm obligated to sign it." Detective Fix wanted to argue, but just then Fogg and Passepartout walked into the office. More than once a rattler. It took everything in Fix's power not to squeak a word, but he couldn't say anything to Fogg until he had an arrest warrant in his paws. When the consul opened Fogg's passport, he said, "I see you're an English citizen, Mr. Fogg." "Where are you travelling to?" "I'm going to South Asia, Bombay, India," responded Fogg politely. The passport was legal, so the consul had to sign it. Fogg and Passepartout headed back to Mongolia, while Detective Fix tugged at his whiskers and twisted his tail. Fogg was getting away. Aboard the ship, Fogg went to his cabin and sat at the table. He calmly pulled out a small notebook and detailed his journey so far. Departed from London, English, October 2nd, 8:45. Arrived in Paris, France, October 3rd, 7:20 a.m. Rode to Torino, Italy, October 4th. Arrived in Brindisi, Italy, October 5th, 4 p.m. Departed in Mongolia, October 5th, 5 p.m. Arrived in Suez, Egypt, October 9th, 11 a.m. Total 6.5 days, as predicted. Meanwhile, down on the clock, Detective Fix placed. How could he keep Fogg from leaving Egypt? He was so close to catching that thief. Passepartout's big mouth. Passepartout walked along the clock, stretching his legs. He looked around, enchanted. "So this is Egypt," he murmured quietly. He was so caught up in his thoughts that he almost bumped right into a stout rodent with a funny looking on his snout. It was Detective Fix. Passepartout didn't know, but Fix had been waiting on the dock, hoping to run into him. Fix wanted to chat with Passepartout in hopes of getting the butler to squeak more about Fogg and their trip. "Oops, excuse me," Passepartout said. Then he recognized Fix. "Oh, Master Fix, it's you," he added. "I want to thank you for helping me earlier." "No problem," Fix responded with a wave of his paw. "So you're going to Bombay?" "You bet you cheddar we are," Passepartout squeaked. "We're travelling all the way around the world." "Holy cheese," Fix said, pretending to be astonished. "Well, I can't imagine how much money you need for a trip like that." "I know," responded Passepartout in a whisper, leaning in towards Fix. "Before we left London, my boss put an enormous stack of money in a suitcase." Fix's fur stood on end. Now he was more convinced than ever that Fogg was the bank thief. Otherwise, how could he have gotten his paws on so much money? Fix had to find out more. The two brothers walked together through the narrow streets of Suez. As they squeaked, Fix learned a cheese-load of fascinating details about Passepartout. Finally, they arrived in front of an enormous outdoor market, and the mice said goodbye. Fix shook his Passepartout's paw. "It's been fabulous talking to you." "Same here," responded Passepartout. "I wish I could chat more, but I have to hurry back to the ship." "Ah, yes," responded Fix, looking at his watch. "It's already noon. Master Cotter, are you kidding? Passepartout cried, pulling his watch from his pocket. My watch says it's only 11 o'clock. I think your watch is running behind, Fix said with a shrug. With all due respect, that's impossible, replied Passepartout, pulling on his whisker. I inherited this watch from my great-grandfather. It's never been ever a second off. Fix thought for a moment, then smiled and said, I know what happened. Your watch is still set to London time, but here in Egypt, it's set to a different zone. Passepartout scurried back to the dock on 2 shakes of a mouse tail, and Fix returned to consultate. I have proof that Fogg is a thief, he said triumphantly. He matches the description given by London police mice. He's travelling with a suitcase full of money. After listening to Fix's story, the consul agreed to request a new arrest warrant from London. It would be sent straight to Bombay, Fogg's next stop. I'm going to Bombay on a Mongolia myself, said Fix firmly, and this time I'll arrest that rat or I'll never eat cheese again. Passepartout loses his shoes. The rest of Fogg's journey on the Mongolia was fit for a true mouse. He happily spent most of the trip playing cards with other passengers. Passepartout on the other paw stuffed himself with masterlistic food and walked around the deck with his new friend Detective Fix. He had no idea that Fix was planning to arrest Fogg. He just enjoyed squeaking with him, so he was pleasurably surprised to find him on board. Finally, on October 2nd, the ship arrived in Bombay, India. Fabulous, Fogg said, stepping onto the dock. We're 2 days ahead of schedule.
Found himself near a beautiful structure with gold ornaments and decorations. It was a sacred religious temple. How fabulous, he exclaimed, peering at the temple. If it's this beautiful on the outside, I can't wait to see the inside. Slimy Swiss balls Passepartout didn't know the rules of the different Indian religions, so he had no idea that the mice couldn't enter a temple wearing shoes. Poor Passepartout accidentally made a huge mistake when he stepped inside the temple with his shoes on. Before he knew it, 3 very angry priests were all yelling at him. Holy cheese! Passepartout was so surprised he didn't know and didn't have time to squeak. Suddenly, the 3 priests pulled his shoes right off his paws and threw them outside. Things could have gotten worse, but luckily Passepartout was an athletic mouse. He leaped to his paws and ran out of the temple as his fur was on fire. Unfortunately, his beautiful red shoes were nowhere to be found. Passepartout hurried back to the train station on bare paws and told Fogg what had happened. He didn't realize Detective Fix was eavesdropping. Swiss cheese on eye! Passepartout offended the Indian rodents. Detective Fix whispered to himself. Looking in the shadows nearby, thanks to his butler, Mr. Fogg's tail, it is in a whole lot of trouble. New shoes and a new friend. Fogg and Passepartout climbed aboard the train and continued on their journey to Calcutta. It was a beautiful day, and the view on the train window was truly mouse-tastic. As always, Fogg sat up straight in the seat with his paws on top of his cane. Passepartout peered into the countryside, twirling his whiskers in astonishment. My dear Passepartout, we need to get you a new pair of shoes, Fogg exclaimed. Suddenly, Passepartout realized that his boss was peering down at his paws, which were wrapped in a travel blanket. His snout turned red with embarrassment. Oh, of course, sir, Passepartout stammered, but at this point, I have to wait until we reach Calcutta. I have good news for you, a voice suddenly said. The train makes a stop at Burhanpur. You can find new shoes there. The voice came from a distinguished-looking gentleman in uniform, standing in the doorway of the train compartment. Nice to meet you. My name is General Francis Cromarty, he said, shaking paws with both Fogg and Passepartout. May I join you? Of course, responded Fogg kindly. I'm Felix Fogg, and this is my butler, Passepartout. The 3 mice sat as quietly as they could for the rest of the afternoon. After dinner, Passepartout fell asleep on the seat with his paws wrapped in the blanket, while Fogg told the general about the journey they had gone. General Cromarty wished Fogg the best of luck in winning his bet. As night fell, the train quickly travelled across the enormous fields and lush green forests. At noon the next day, October 21st, the train arrived in Burhanpur. As usual, Fogg did not get off, but the General and Passepartout headed outside to stretch their paws. An hour later, the train pulled out of the station, and the 2 rodents went back to their seats. Passepartout was positively cheered, and he was no longer shoeless. Instead, he had bought a very interesting pair of Indian slippers that he now wore on his paws. The train chugged along, but before long it slowed to a stop. Holy cheese, what was going on? I don't understand, Fogg said. There aren't any more scheduled stops until Calcutta. Passepartout got off the train and tracked down the conductor. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Where are we right now?" "We're in Colby," the conductor replied. "Can you tell me why we stopped?" Passepartout asked. "Simple," the conductor smiled and shrugged. "Because this is where the track ends." Poor Passepartout squeaked and twisted his tail. "The track ends?" "The rest of the railroad tracks haven't been laid yet," the conductor said. "When you bought your ticket, the agent should have told you that you were responsible for finding transportation for this leg of the trip. Now, how in the name of all things cheesy will they get to Calcutta?" The conductor told Passepartout other runners were travelling by port. Passepartout scurried back to the train to break the bad news to his boss, while Fogg didn't twitch a whisker. "Don't worry, Passepartout. I expected that we'd run into some trouble on our journey." "But, sir," Passepartout squeaked in dismay, "I can't walk to Calcutta in these slippers." "You're right. That won't do." General Cromarty agreed. "We need another method of travel." "That's exactly what I was thinking," Fogg replied, returning to his butler. Fogg was smart to trust Passepartout. The resourceful rodent scampered away faster than a mouse on a cheese hunt, and soon returned with a big smile on his snout. "I found something," he cried, waving for Fogg and General Cromarty to follow him. A moment later, the three mouse found themselves standing in front of an enormous Indian elephant. "Allow me to introduce Kurimi," Passepartout said. "Very mouse job," said Fogg, without touching a whisker. Now, they just had to persuade the owner of the elephant to sell it to them. At first, Fogg offered £600, then 800, and finally 1,000, but the old Indian mouse resisted, holding out for even more money. "Be careful, Mr. Fogg," whispered General Cromarty, pulling him aside. "You could spend a mountain of money here." Fogg assured the general that he knew what he was doing. Finally, he bought the elephant for £2,000. When Passepartout saw him hand over the stack of money, he felt dizzy. "Cheese crackers!" he exclaimed, pale as a ball of mozzarella. "I didn't realize that travelling in India would be so expensive." Fogg, always a gentle mouse, offered General Cromarty a ride in Calcutta. Then he hired a young guide to lead the elephant. The four rodents set off. General Cromarty, Fogg, and Passepartout sat inside an enormous basket attached to the back of the elephant. It wasn't a very comfortable trip. With every step the elephant took, they were tossed from side to side. There was a bunch of rattled rats after travelling across the forest all day. They finally stopped for night and camped in a clearing between the trees. General Cromarty lit a fire for cooking and for keeping the tigers away. Squeak! After dinner, Fogg, Passepartout, and General Cromarty covered themselves with blankets and fell asleep around the fire, while the guide stayed close to the elephant. After breakfast the following morning, they set off again. Everything was going fabulously, but suddenly they heard sounds in the distance. The guide made the elephant stop, and everyone listened louder. The sounds got louder and louder. It sounded like it was sad wailing. The four mice peeked through the thick bushes and saw an incredible sight. A long line of rodents wound among the trees. There were about 50 mice dressed in tunics and turbans. They followed an enormous wooden cart carrying the motionless body of a rodent. The guide gasped. "That's a Raja and an Indian prince," he explained in a whisper. "You can tell because he's wearing a gold robe and a special turban." "It's a funeral procession," General Cromarty whispered in Fogg's ear. "I've been there many times in India." After getting a closer look, the guide told them that the body in the cart belonged to Raja of Buckland, our region in central India. But that wasn't all. Behind the cart walked a beautiful young rodent dressed in a long, fancy tunic. Her tail was wrapped in a fabulous knot, and a tiara sparkled above her ears. The rodent looked extremely unhappy. "That's the late prince's wife," the guide explained. "Now that her husband is no longer alive, it looks like she's being held captive by other mice." Poor rodent, Passepartout noted. "That's terrible. I wish there was something we could do to help her." Everyone was silent for a moment before Fogg murmured, "Maybe there is." Fogg spaced out. "Maybe we can rescue her." General Cromarty frowned and scratched his snout. "Maybe," he agreed. "But be careful. It's risky. We don't know why those mice are holding her prisoner. They might not be very nice if they catch you." That evening the group of mice from the funeral made the camp. The princess sat off to one side alone, peering at her paws miserably. Fogg tiptoed up to the princess, trying not to startle her. "Princess," he whispered, "my name is Phileas Fogg. My friends and I are travelling around the world, and we came across your procession this afternoon. Is it true that you are being held against your will?" "Yes," the princess replied. "I'm our order. I was the prince's wife. These mice want me to give them all my husband's treasures." "We would be happy to help you escape," Fogg said quickly. You can join us on our journey if there's somewhere you'd like to go. But before Alda could squeak, a cry rang through the air. Intruder! The other mice spotted Fog and they didn't look happy. Just then Passepartout bursted out into the woods. He distracted the other rodents so that Fog and Alda could get away. A few minutes later, Kiyomi the elephant headed into the forest with an extra passenger on board, Princess Alda. Passepartout's courage and his fierce determination to help his boss had paid off. As soon as they had gone far enough away, Kiyomi stopped and the mice rallied around Passepartout. General Cromarty shook his paw. Marvelous job, young rodent. Fog had a huge smile on his snout too. Fabulous work, my friend, he said. He was calm as usual, but this time it was clear that he was very thankful. Passepartout grinned from ear to ear. I was only doing my job, sir. Princess Alda tapped Passepartout on the shoulder and thanked him with a little bow. You're brave, my dear mouse. Thank you for rescuing me and making it possible for me to join you and your friends on your expedition. Passepartout turned as red as a cheese stuffed pepper. He never imagined he'd ever squeak to a real princess. After a quick rest, they all set off again. During their travels, the princess told them more of her sad story. Princess Alda had grown up in Bombay, but had received a Western education. Her life had been very happy, and her marriage to the Raja was truly fabulous. But when the poor princess tried to explain what happened to her husband, tears ran down her snout, and she couldn't squeak.
Fog put a gentle paw on her shoulder. Are you sure you want to travel with us? Alda dried her tears and nodded firmly. Yes, thank you. I need a fresh start. I can't imagine staying in India without my husband. So it was decided Princess Alda was officially joining the journey. When they finally arrived in Allahabad, Fog paid the guide and said, We couldn't have made it there without you. I'm so grateful for your help. I'd like to give you the elephant as a token of my appreciation. The guide had forged a special bond with Kirumi, and he couldn't help keep her tears in. Even Kirumi seemed happy when Passepartout went to hand him a cube of sugar. The elephant wrapped in his trunk around Passepartout's waist and lifted him high in the air. Laughing and waving his arms, Passepartout gave the animal a pat on the forehead before Kirumi lowered the butler to the ground. Holy Tuesday afternoon, Fog, Passepartout, General Cromarty, and Princess Alda caught a train to Calcutta. Unfortunately, the general had to get off at one of the stops along the way to rejoin the troops. Fog promised the general that he would come visit once they both returned to London. Even so, it was enormously hard to say goodbye. October 25th, Ford and Alda and Passepartout got off the train in Calcutta. Even though they had had some setbacks, they were still on schedule. Just when everything seemed to be going fabulously, a policeman approached them. Are you Phileas Fogg? He asked with a scowl on his snout. That's us, Fogg responded with a friendly nod. How can we help you? Follow me, the policeman ordered. You and your butler are under arrest. Travelling on Rangoon, Fogg and Passepartout didn't know it, but Detective Fix had been right on their tails. He was the rodent behind their arrest. He had persuaded their three angry priests to press charges against Passepartout for not removing his shoes in the temple in Bombay. That way he could arrest the butler and his boss too. Poor Passepartout had no idea that the penalty for his mistake in the temple was so serious. But that was all just a way for Detective Fix to keep him and Fogg in Calcutta for a few days, long enough to receive the new warrant from London. Everything was just as Fix had hoped. The judge sentenced Passepartout to 8 days in prison. Since Fogg was his boss, Indian law said he had to go to prison too. Fix smiled to himself and rubbed his paws together, satisfied. Slimy whispers, what a disaster! Passepartout groaned miserably. As usual, Fogg didn't let the situation ruffle his fur. Instead, he asked to avoid time in prison by paying a fine instead. He was determined to continue on his journey. The judge accepted his proposal and ordered him to pay £2,000. It was an enormous sum, but Fogg handed over the money without touching a whisker. Just like that, they were free to leave. Impossible, Detective Fix muttered to himself, twisting his tail into a knot. This resourceful warrant keeps getting away. Passepartout felt terribly guilty. Because of him, they were losing the bet. Plus, Fogg had spent a cheeseload of money to get them out of trouble. When Passepartout saw the three priests in the courtroom, he demanded that they return his red shoes. It was the least they could do after Fogg had spent such a large sum to guarantee his and Passepartout's freedom.
At noon on the dot on October 25th, the steamship Rangoon sailed for Hong Kong with Fogg, Passepartout, and Elder on board. Little did they know, Detective Fix was also on board. He had decided to follow Fogg like a shadow to Hong Kong, in hopes of arresting him there at last. In the meantime, he planned to learn as much as possible from Fogg by squeaking with his friend Passepartout. Early one morning, Detective Fix left his cabin and went on the desk. Passepartout was enjoying the fresh, salty ocean and the view of the Indian Ocean. Detective Fix pretended to be surprised to see him. "Mr. Passepartout," he cried, grasping his paws. "Double-twisted rat-tails, what a coincidence!" Passepartout could hardly believe his eyes. "Body mozzarella, Mr. Fix. What are you doing on this boat?" He paused for a moment. "Why, haven't I bumped into you on the ship before now? You must have boarded in Calcutta, right?" Detective Fix hadn't expected questions. Embarrassed, he thought fast and responded, "Oh, I suffer from seasickness. This is the first day I've been able to get out of bed since coming aboard." After that, Fix made sure to cross Passepartout's path every day. But even though Detective Fix was a perfect gentle mouse, Passepartout couldn't help feel suspicious. All the coincidences seemed very strange. First meeting Fix in Suez and in Bombay, down the boat to Hong Kong. It was almost as if this rodent was following them. Passepartout started to wonder if Fix was a spy, sent by the members of the Reform Club to make sure that Fogg didn't cheat on his trip around the world. On the morning of October 31st, after 1 week at sea, the Rangoon docked in Singapore to stock up the supplies. As usual, it was Passepartout's job to go to shopping, but this time Fogg got off at the boat too. To everyone's surprise, he had invited Princess Aouda to go sightseeing, and she'd agreed. They spent a fabulous day touring the city in a carriage. Detective Fox and the other four didn't have much fun at all. He spent the whole day secretly following Fogg and Aouda. After a day in Singapore, everyone got out on board the Rangoon and set off for Hong Kong. Detective Fix spent hours pacing his cabin on tired paws, trying to come up with a plan to trap Fogg for good. He was so sure that Phileas Fogg was the Bank of London thief that he was willing to do whatever it took to arrest him. At that point, it was a matter of mousy pride. Fix hadn't been able to nab Fogg in Suez, Bombay, Calcutta, or Singapore. At Hong Kong, he was finally going to prove that he had the skills and guts to be a big cheese police detective. But one thing that really put Fix's tail in a twist: the British arrest warrant would only be good until they left Hong Kong. After that, Fogg would no longer be in British territory. From that point until his return to London, he couldn't be arrested without a much more complicated warrant. "Great quarter, if I don't catch him in Hong Kong, it will be too late," Fix whispered to himself. Fogg and the other poor didn't seem like a mouse who would lose £20,000 traveling around the world. He was as cool as iced cheese. Fogg found some Marble Mouse card players aboard the ship, and that was enough to keep him happy. Having Princess Aouda around didn't hurt either. No one would ever call Fogg a chatterbox, but he definitely did like squeaking with the princess. She was extremely intelligent and well-travelled rodent, and she brought out a side of Fogg most rodents had never seen. Passepartout spent his days on the ship eating, while around the deck he was squeaking with Detective Fix. The trip was going fantastically so far, but over the next few days, the weather changed. Enormous clouds darkened in the sky, and the pleasant breeze was replaced with a strong gust of wind. Holy cheese, a storm was brewing. By November 3rd, the climate changed completely. A storm raged all around the ship. The wind and the waves crashed inside the sides of the box, making it bow and creak. Body mozzarella. This was another setback that was ruining Fogg's trip. Passepartout was so anxious that he almost pulled out of his fur. He would have jumped out into the sea, tied the boat to his tail, and pulled it behind him, if he could. "If we didn't arrive late by November 5th, he murmured, twisting his tail nervously, "we'll miss our connecting boat to Yokohama." Since he couldn't pull the boat himself, Passepartout tried to help the crew during the storm. He tossed coal into the boilers, ran around delivering messages for the captain, and climbed the mats as fast as he could. Finally, after 2 terrible days, the storm ended. The boat could travel at full speed again. Unfortunately, they couldn't make up the lost time, so the Rangoon reached the port of Hong Kong at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on November the 6th. They were a whole day late. Passepartout leaned against the railing as the ship docked, shaking his snout in disappointment. They had missed the connection. Fogg, who had never lost his card at any point during the storm, asked the captain,
What's the first boat leaving for Yokohama? The Carnatic, sir, responded the captain. It leaves tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the morning. Past Pursuit's ears perked up. But didn't the Carnatic depart yesterday? Fogg asked. It should have, replied the captain, but there was a boiler failure. They had to make some repairs, so the departure was scheduled for tomorrow. Passepartout squeaked with joy. Poor Passepartout. What fabulous news! Passepartout could barely believe a boiler failure had saved them. See, Passepartout, Fogg said with a grin, not all setbacks are bad. If they had missed the Carnatic, they would have had to wait almost a week to get out of Hong Kong. Their trip around the world would have been ruined. Instead, they checked into a comfortable hotel. After they had gotten settled, Fogg asked Passepartout to go to the port and buy 3 tickets for the Carnatic. Passepartout scurried out happily, excited to take advantage of the errand and see a bit of the city. He loved exploring all the marvelous places that he visited. At the port, another nice surprise awaited him. As it turns out, said the ticket agent, the boiler failure had already been prepared. In the interest of time, the Carnatic will leave tonight instead of tomorrow. That's music to my ears, cheered Passepartout. We'll be able to make up for the half time lost in the storm. This must be my lucky day. Unfortunately, poor Passepartout had spoken too soon. As he walked along the streets back to the hotel, he saw Ronald with a familiar snout coming towards him. Mr. Fix, he said, shaking his paw. If I didn't know better, I think you were following me. Detective Fix laughed. What a funny coincidence. Would you like to get a cup of tea? Passepartout paused for a moment. Maybe this was his chance to confront Fix about being a spy for members of the Reform Club. I need to get back to the hotel to let Mr. Fogg know that our ship will leave tonight, but I'll probably have time for one quick cup. This time Fix had finally decided to tell Passepartout the truth. Since they were friends now, he hoped that Passepartout would help him, especially when the butler realized that his boss was a thief. The two Rons walked into a beautiful tea house and sat down on some silk cushions. You should know the truth, Mr. Passepartout, Fix said right away. Your boss, Phileas Fogg, is a thief. He went on to explain about the bank theft. Then he showed Passepartout the description of the theft, which matched Fogg to the whisker. Passepartout's snout turned bright red. How dare you? Who do you think you are? He squeaked. I'm a police detective, Fix said calmly, and I need your help keeping Fogg here in Hong Kong for a few days. Passepartout didn't want to hear another word. This trip isn't an excuse to escape, Passepartout said firmly. Mr. Fogg is innocent. He really made a bet that he could travel around the world in 80 days. Fix said heavily. It was clear that nothing he could say would convince that butler to change his mind. Passepartout was loyal to his boss. Fix only had one last move to keep Fogg from leaving Hong Kong. When Passepartout wasn't looking, Detective Fix poured a mysterious potion into the butler's teacup. After taking a few sips, Passepartout's eyelid began to grow heavy. Before he could touch the whisker, he fell into a deep sleep. Peacefully asleep on the tea house cushions, Detective Fix rubbed his paws together. Phew, this way, he can't tell Fogg that the boat leaves tonight. By tomorrow, it will be too late. A lucky voyage. If Fogg hadn't been such a cool and collected mouse, the morning of November 7th would have been an enormous shock. He knocked on Passepartout's door twice, but the butler was nowhere to be found. Holy cheese, something strange was going on. When Fogg and our order asked at the front desk, they found out that Passepartout had never returned to the hotel the night before. Rancid ricotta. As always, Fogg stayed calm while he gathered their bags and headed for their port with the princess. He hoped that Passepartout was already there waiting for them. Unfortunately, when they reached the port, they were met with bad news. Passepartout wasn't there, and even worse, the ship had left the night before. Just then, Detective Fix haunted by. I heard the next ship doesn't leave for another 8 days, he said sadly. He explained that he had also missed the Carnatic and pretended to be disappointed. I guess we'll just have to wait here for the next week. But instead, Detective Fix jumped for joy. He had finally been able to stop Fogg. 8 days, Fogg replied thoughtfully. There must be another boat that can bring us to Yokohama before then. They set out the port with their order, searching far and wide for a ship to transport them. Detective Fix followed Fogg like a cat on a rat's tail. Yet again, Fogg was in luck. After a few hours, a friendly sailor walked up. Are you looking for a boat, sir? He asked politely. Fogg looked at the sailor cautiously. May I ask who you are, my dear mouse? The sailor smiled broadly. John Bunsby, sir, captain of the schooner Tanker. Pleased to meet you, Captain, Fogg said. Where are you headed? We're looking for a ride to Yokohama. Bunsby's mouth fell open. He looked at Fogg as if he'd seen a cat pirate. Are you joking, sir? He squeaked.
My schooner is too light and small to make such a long voyage. It would be terribly dangerous. Fogg wasn't one to give up easily. Well, where can the tanker sail? He said. I could easily take you to Shanghai, the captain responded. Fogg quickly explained about his journey around the world. He said to make it to Yokohama, since that's where he'd meet the steamship headed for San Francisco. Cheese niblets, Bunsby cried. The ship to San Francisco passes through Yokohama, but leaves from Shanghai. Fogg nearly jumped out of his fur. If you can take us to Shanghai, I'll pay you £100 a day, plus an extra £200 if we arrive in time to catch that ship. The captain snatched his snout thoughtfully. Today is November 7th. If weather and luck are on our side, I guarantee that we'll arrive in Shanghai by the 11th. Listening nearby, Detective Fogg tugged on his whiskers in frustration. Fogg was about to slip through his paws again. Once they got the details in order, Fogg said goodbye to the captain and then walked over to Fix with a friendly smile. I'd like to offer you a ride. Surprised, Fix nodded and accepted the invitation. All he could do now was allow Fogg to England and follow him to England and hope to arrest him there. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Tankadere left Hong Kong, heading for Shanghai. Fogg hoped that Passepartout had caught the Carnatic the night before he could meet them in Yokohama. The weather was fabulous for sailing, and the boat moved along at full speed. At downlight, the ship was perfect fit for the inlets along the Chinese coast. Princess Aouda spent much time of the journey leaning against the brass railing, looking out on the horizon. How are you doing, Princess? Asked Fogg. Very well, Fogg, she replied. Thanks to you, I'm having quite the adventure. But I'm worried about Passepartout. I hope he's okay. Another storm. The one word who wasn't enjoying the journey was Detective Fix. Poor me, he moaned to himself. The whole thing that could make the trip worse is being seasick. Luck was not on my side. Every time he'd had the chance to arrest Fogg, he didn't have the warrant in his paws. And now, even if he had the warrant, it wouldn't do him any good. It wasn't valid outside the British territory. Cheesy cream puffs. How frustrating. Fix would just have to wait until they reached England to arrest Fogg. Well, at least I don't have to waste my time talking to my boring French butler anymore, he muttered, returning below decks. Fogg thought about Passepartout often during the ship's journey too. It was so unlike the butler to disappear without a squeak. There to be more to the story. Fogg crossed his paws and hoped that Passepartout had made it to the Carnatic. Once they arrived in Yokohama, finding out if a Frenchman, a boat from Hong Kong, would be as easy as sniffing out a sharp cheddar. Captain Bunsby's ship moved along calmly and quickly. In just 2 days, they travelled more than 100 miles. But rats, they began to run into trouble early on November 9th. The sea changed abruptly and larger, more powerful waves rolled through, tossing the boat from side to side. Dangerous winds blowed them down. The captain tugged on his whiskers and told Fogg, I'm afraid we're heading for a storm. I'm not worried, Captain, Fogg responded without a twitching of whisker. I trust you and your crew. Fogg was right to trust him. Bunsby's experience and ability were about to save their tails. Around 8 o'clock that night, the Tankadere was enveloped by a terrifying storm. Rain and wind pounded the decks, and waves crashed from every direction. Fogg, Fix, and Aouda were knocked off their paws. They all had to grab on to the railing so they wouldn't fall overboard. But through it, the captain gave calm, precise orders that his crews followed faster than a mice on a cheese hunt. More than once, the boat was in danger of sinking, overwhelmed by the powerful sea. But Captain Bunsby figured out how to save them every time. The storm raged on all night, and Captain Bunsby thought about stopping at the nearest port. But Fogg was stubborn, pushing them forward. I only have my eye on one port, Shanghai, he said to the captain, and I know you're the mouse who can get us there. Finally, on the morning of November 11th, the storm cleared up. The sea calmed and the ship bobbed lightly over the waves again. Unfortunately, the storm had cost them valuable time, and now it was impossible for them to make it to Shanghai when they had planned. At 7 o'clock, when they were supposed to be boarding the steamship to San Francisco, they were still 3 miles away from the port of Shanghai. Cheese and crackers, molded mozzarella, exclaimed Captain Bunsby. Letting go of the rudder, it's too late. An enormous black silhouette appeared in the distance. It was the steamship General Grant departing for San Francisco. Rats! Fogg had officially missed it, but as usual, fearless Fogg wasn't discouraged. Instead, here's a mouse-tastic idea, Captain, he cried. Put the flag at half-mast and shoot off the cannon. At sea, those actions are signal for help. Any ship that sees the signal is obligated to respond. It worked. As soon as the crew of the General Grant heard the cannon and saw the flag, they stopped to help the Tankadere. Within a few minutes, Fogg, Aouda, and Fix were on board the steamship that would bring them to the United States. The Fogg's marvelous journey around the world continued. What happened to Passepartout? So when the name of All Things Cheesy was Prostitute, he'd had quite an adventure. After Detective Fix had left him sleeping in a tea house, two waiters had carried him to the door and set him gently in the street. After a few hours, he woke up confused and foggy-headed. He could hardly remember his own name, but one thought scampered through his mind: get to the Carnatic. Weak and disorientated, he stumbled to the port onto the ship. Then, exhausted, he fell asleep in a lifeboat. At the light of dawn, a fresh breeze woke him up. Prostitute shook his snout, and little by little he began to remember what had happened the night before. He thought more about the Bank of London robbery, and he was sure that Detective Fix was crazier than the mouse taunting a cat. Fog a bank robber? Thundering cattails? That was impossible. Finally, Prostitute got to his paws and tracked down the captain. After introducing himself, he asked for the numbers of Phileas Fogg's cabin. The captain looked at the passenger list and told him that there was no mouse named Phileas Fogg on board. Prostitute insisted on checking again, but the captain became impatient. He repeated that Fogg was not on board. Then turned his back and left. Prostitute collapsed on a chair and on the deck bewildered. Holy cheese, how was the Fogg and Alda weren't on the ship? After a moment, Prostitute realized that it was his fault. He hadn't told Fogg the Carnatic was leaving early. That cheesebrain Fix was really the one to blame. He thought because of him, Prostitute hadn't been able to get back to the hotel. But either way, Fogg had left behind in Hong Kong. Cheese nibblets, what a disaster. Now Prostitute had yet another problem, an enormous one. Food on board the boat had been paid for in advance. But what would they do? Once they arrived in Yokohama, he only had a few coins in his pocket. He could barely buy a single slice of Swiss with those. He decided not to think about it until they arrived. Worrying wouldn't do any mouse any good. But there was one thing that would do him good: heading to the kitchen to fill its stomach. Circus life. On the morning of November 13, the Carnatic arrived in Yokohama. Prostitute got off on the boat well rested and stuffed full of good food, but his problems were really about to begin. During the trip, he had eaten enough for 3 mice, but here on land, he had no way to pay for the food at all. What a mousely mess. He stopped in the middle of the crowd of rodents leaving the boat and looked around. For the love of cheese, what can a French butler do in Japan to earn some money, he muttered. After brainstorming a few different plans, he decided to go and exchange his clothes for something less expensive. He could at least use the money from the exchange to buy lunch. Up ahead he spotted a little ship that seemed to be set up like a clothing shop. A few minutes later he came out wrapped in old Japanese kimono with some coins in his pocket. His plan worked. Prostitute headed out to find a quick lunch. Feeling confident that everything was going to be okay, but after a few hours he was hungry again. Tattering cheddar. By now Prostitute had used up all his money and all his ideas. The only solution he could think of was to leave Japan as quickly as possible, heading for America. Maybe once he arrived, then he'd be able to catch up with Fogg again. But where will I find the money for the ticket, he said to himself, wandering the streets of Yokohama. Suddenly a sign caught his attention. Grand Acrobat Company of Mr. Baktukala. Last show in Asia before touring the United States. Exceptional exhibition of the long noses. Don't miss it. Touring the United States, Prostitute read it aloud, his eyes sparkling. What a rat's teeth, this is just what I've been looking for. Finding the circus wasn't difficult, the enormous, colourful tent was easy to spot. A colossal mouse with very long whiskers noticed him standing nearby and walked over to see what he had wanted. It was the owner of the circus, Mr. Bakuta himself. Prostitute gathered his courage, shook Mr. Bakula's hand, and said, "You don't need a servant by chance, do you?" "I already have 2 who work for free and never complain," responded Mr. Bakula rudely. But Prostitute wasn't about to give up easily. "Oh, that's too bad. I'm a fabulous butler and also know how to do a balancing act and stand upside down with a spinning top balance on my paws," he said, shaking his snout in disappointment. And you're strong too?" he asked. "Very strong, sir," said Prostitute proudly, "especially when I have a full stomach." Batukula grinned like a cat who just got a plump roll for dinner. "All right, young mouse, you're hired." Before walking away, he added, "You'll start right away. Join the other circus rodents for practice. We'll test your skills tomorrow night of long noses." The exhibition of the long noses was the circus' most unique and popular act. These rodents acrobats wore small white wings on their backs and masks with their very long noses made of bamboo shoots. First a group of acrobats lay on the ground with their noses in the air. Then a second group climbed on their noses and balanced there. A third group of acrobats then climbed on their noses on the second group, and so on. Eventually formed a giant rodent pyramid, all made up by standing on one another's leg bamboo noses. It was a mouse-tasty sight. Passepartout was very strong, so he was chosen to be part of the first row of acrobats that to hold the weight of the whole pyramid above them. The next evening during the circus, after Passepartout had the chance to practice with the other acrobats, the Long Noses act began with an absolute silence. The crowd held its breath, watching in awe as the pyramid rose towards the top. So far, Passepartout was doing a fabulous job. After a few nerve-wracking minutes, the pyramid was complete. The crowd burst into thunderous applause, cheering and clapping their ways. But before anyone realized what was happening, the pyramid began to sway. The acrobats lost their balance, and bam! The whole group of acrobats tumbled to the ground, one on top of another. As it turned out, a rodent had abandoned his place in the pyramid, making the thing topple. It was Passepartout. Together again, the whole pyramid was a mess, and was Passepartout's fault. As they lay in the uncomfortable position at the base of the pyramid, he had peeked out the audience. And guess who was in the crowd? Holy cheese, it was Fearless Frog and Princess Aouda. Passepartout squeaked with joy. Without thinking, he jumped to his paws and raced towards his prince. Mr. Fogg yelled, weeping through the spectators. Creamy cheese puffs, Passepartout exclaimed, Fogg, looking shocked. He ran up to the young butler and shook his paw gleefully. Aouda was thrilled to see Passepartout again. She gave him a kiss on the cheek that made him blush. Let's go, said Fogg with a smile. The General Grant awaits, but the exit was blocked by a giant rodent with a scowl on his snout. Cheese niblets, it was Mr. Bactucula. Where do you think you're going? He snarled, pointing at Passepartout. This rat ruined the long-nosed act and my reputation. I am willing to compensate you for your trouble, said Fogg in two shakes of the mouse's tail. He reached inside his suitcase. How much would you like? It wasn't the first time Fogg had poured over a stack of money to save Passepartout's tail, and it probably wouldn't be the last. Squeak. A few hours later, the three rodents boarded the steamship General Grant had and departed for San Francisco. Crossing the Pacific Ocean would take 21 days. During the trip, Fogg and Aouda told Passepartout that they had asked him about when they arrived in Yokohama. Knowing Passepartout's history, including all the crazy jobs he had, Fogg thought there was a chance of finding him at Bactucula's circus, and tattooing Cheddar had been right. Princess Aouda told Passepartout the story of the trip and the Tankadere with Detective Fix. Hearing Fix's name, Passepartout didn't twitch a whisker. I wouldn't tell Fogg about Detective Fix's accusation until we're back in London, he thought. It's not worth worrying about now, and I don't want to distract him. But deep down, Passepartout hoped that he'd be able to teach that rat Fix a lesson. Off to America. Passepartout didn't know it, but Detective Fix was closer than he thought. In fact, he was on board the General Grant. Of course, if Fix had known that Passepartout was also on the ship, he would have kept his snout hidden. After the trick he played on Passepartout in Hong Kong, the butler was one rodent Fix didn't want to run into again anytime soon. But when Fix crossed Passepartout's path on the deck on the ship, Passepartout immediately followed him. No matter when or where Fix went, he couldn't escape. Passepartout was always on his tail. Enough, squeaked Fix breathlessly, turning to face the raging rodent. You have every right to be angry with me, but now things are different. I'm not trying to stop Fogg anymore. I want him to reach London like you do, so we can figure out if he's a thief. Passepartout didn't trust the detective, but what could he do? They were stuck on the ship together. Passepartout vowed to keep Fix's snout in sight, so he couldn't put a whisker out of line. And since Fix wanted to keep an eye on Fogg, it looked like the rodents were stuck with each other for the rest of the journey. The voyage continued as planned, and on November the 23rd, Fogg noted in his journal that they had travelled halfway around the world. That same day, Passepartout realized that his watch had been perfectly accurate again. Holy cheese, strange! 12 days later, on December the 5th, General Grant dropped anchor in the port of San Francisco right on time. The first train for New York left at 6 o'clock that evening, so Fogg had plenty of time to stop by the British consul to get a signature and his passport. Aouda, Fix, and Passepartout went along with them, excited to see the city. Passepartout was fantastically worked up. How fabulous, America, he said with a sigh. The land of progress, freedom and brotherhood. Just as he finished squeaking, he turned a corner and a mushy apple hit him in the direct snout. Great Gorda, what was going on? Passepartout and his friends found themselves surrounded by a crowd of rowdy rodents, all yelling and waving flags. The mice threw vegetables, fruits, and anything else they could find on their paws. Passepartout, Fogg, Fix, and Order had walked right into the middle of the campaign rally. Apparently, the two political groups had decided that squeaking in a friendly way wasn't going to solve their disagreements. Now they'd move on other ways of making themselves heard, like throwing things. Moldy mozzarella. I think we should get out of here right away, Mr. Fogg, Passepartout yelped, pushing his way through the crowd as they tried to get by a large rodent with a strange beard and an enormous hat bumped into Detective Fix. Cheese and crackers, Fix cried indignantly. You could at least say excuse me. I don't excuse myself for anyone, the rodent responded with a scowl. Without another word, he grabbed Fix by the collar and threw him to the ground. Fogg quickly held up a paw. What's your name, sir? He asked calmly. Colonel Stamp Proctor, the rodent responded gruffly. Well, Colonel Proctor, you're extremely rude, Fogg said. I have no choice but to challenge you to a duel. Colonel Protector didn't make him squeak the challenge twice. He began to take off his jacket. Holy cheese. Bison stampede. Just then the crowd got extremely rowdy, and Colonel Proctor was carried off in a wave of pushing, shoving mice. I gave you my word as a gentle mouse, then I will return. Fogg called after him, while the Fogg and his companions headed towards the train station, leaving the rude rodent behind. At 6 o'clock on the dot, they departed on the train that would bring them all the way across the United States to New York. The trip should have taken 7 days, but it was nearly as smooth as mozzarella milkshake. At dawn on the morning of the third day, Passepartout sleepily opened one eye. Peering out the cabin window, he thought he saw a white cloud on the horizon. When he opened the other eye, he saw that the cloud was growing larger and larger and coming dangerously close to the train. Cheesy cream puffs, maybe I'm dreaming, he thought, rubbing his eyes with his paws. Instead, when he looked more closely, he realized that it was an enormous herd of bison stampeding and kicking up a cloud of dust. Afraid that the train would crash into the bison, he began to holler, Hurry, hurry, wake up, shake your tail, we're about to be chased. Luckily, the train stopped in time to let the bison cross the tracks. Phew. Unluckily, the bison moved more slowly than these one do. How much longer is this going to take? Passepartout asked the train conductor, tapping his paws impatiently. The conductor responded with a shrug. He said that sometimes it took up to 3 hours for a herd of bison to cross the tracks. 3 hours chattering chitter, Passepartout squeaked. At this rate, we're going to be late to New York. As usual, Fogg didn't twitch a whisker at the setback. But Passepartout twisted his tail nervously as they waited for the bison to pass. After 3 long hours, the train could finally come on its way. But after only an hour, the train stopped again. The conductor had more bad news. The bridge up ahead is unstable. The only way we might make it by accelerating to full speed. The faster we go, the faster we'll get across. Even if the bridge falls, we might make it across before it collapses. But it's an enormous risk to take. Passepartout thought the plan sounded much too dangerous, but some of the passengers wanted to try it. No one wanted to get off the train and walk miles and miles through the snow. Never a dull moment. After discussing with the crew, the conductor decided to try crossing the bridge. Holy cheese, would the dangerous maneuver be worth it? The train driver brought the boiler to maximum power. Then with a long whistle, the train chugged to top speed. It shot quickly across the bridge with all the mice on board, holding their breath. How freezing. Just a few seconds after the train reached the other side, the bridge crumpled into the void with a deafening roar. Rat-munching rattlesnakes, that was close. Paws trembling, Passepartout collapsed into his seat. But as he glanced around at the other relieved passengers, he spotted a familiar snout that he was hoping never to see again. Colonel Proctor. Fogg was sleeping, but when Passepartout told Princess Aouda that he had seen Colonel Proctor on the train, she turned as white as a ball of mozzarella. She was born of the gentle mouse Fogg, and the idea of him raising his tail in a duel made her fur stand on end. You have to keep Fogg and the other colonel away from each other, she squeaked, biting her poor nails. It won't be easy, said Passepartout. The train isn't very big, and we can't keep Mr. Fogg tied to his seat. Detective Fix had been eavesdropping, and as soon as he heard those words, his ears perked up. He wanted to keep Fogg safe, too, until he had the chance to arrest him. I'm sure Fogg would stay in his seat for hours if he were playing cards, he suggested. I'd be happy to play with him. Fogg never turned down a game of cards, so he accepted Fix's invitation gladly. Fabulous idea, he cried to Passepartout and Elder's relief. Fix's idea seemed to work. Fogg was so caught up in the game that he didn't even stop to eat a cheese crumb of lunch. But even as evening fell, a booming voice suddenly rang out from behind Fogg. "If I were you, I'd get rid of that Queen of Hearts." Passepartout, Elder, Fix, and Fogg all turned their seats and saw Colonel Proctor. "We meet again," said Fogg, coolly placing his cards down on the table. "Now we can settle things once and for all." Elder begged him not to fight the Colonel, but Fogg was determined. When a British gentleman challenges someone to a duel, nothing can change his mind. They decided that the duel would take place in the last train car, with all the other rodents cleared out. Fogg and the Colonel stood snout to snout, glaring at each other. Both mice may have been quaking in their fur, but neither would ever admit it. They both wanted to win, without a whisker of a doubt. Just as they were about to get started, pandemonium broke loose through the train. For the love of cheese, what could it be now? Phileas Fogg the Brave. Wild screams erupted from the plane. Holy cheese! Faster than anyone could shake a tail, the train was surrounded by a dozen mice on horseback. The train was caught in the middle of a Sioux battle. Proctor and Fogg immediately rushed to the windows. But before either of them could speak, some of the Sioux jumped aboard the train. The arrival of the Sioux caused a cheese-loaded chaos on the train. Most of the fighting was still happening out in the plains, where the Native Americans on board argued loudly and added to the confusion. Everyone was out of their seats blocking the aisles. Even worse, the engineer had fainted from all the excitement. Now the train sped across the tracks at top speed. "Rats, we have to stop the train at the Fort Kearing station." The conductor yelled. A squad of soldiers then came help to sort things out. "I promise you that I'll make the train stop," Fogg cried, "if it's the last thing I'll do." But Passepartout bravely held up a paw before Fogg even had a chance to move. "This is my job, sir." Taking a deep breath, he opened a trapdoor in the floor and slid underneath the train car. There he clung to the wheel. Axles and passed underneath the whole train, from one car to the next, all the mice to the front. Passepartout was a mouse on a mission. Passepartout moved quickly and surely until he reached the engine. With one great pull, he detached it from the rest of the train. Cheesy cream puffs, this was close. Just in time, he whispered, watching the engine race into the distance. The rest of the train slowed down gradually until it stopped right near the front Kearney station, just as Passepartout had planned. The soldiers at the station immediately rushed to clear the train. The arguing Sioux returned to the tribe. Unfortunately, before they left, the Sioux took some prisoners, and one of those unlucky rodents was Passepartout. Slimy Swissballs, Fogg insisted that the soldiers rescue the prisoners immediately. But the soldiers weren't authorized to leave the station without a commanding officer and the captain, and had to remain at the fort. "I'll go alone then," Fogg said firmly. "My butler's among the prisoners, and I'll do whatever it takes to bring him and the other prisoners back safely." The military captain nodded respectfully. "You're a brave mouse. I want to help you. However, I can take 30 of my soldiers with you. You will serve as the commanding officer. The rest of us can protect the station easily. Good luck." Several hours passed, but there was no sign of Fogg or the soldiers. It was now completely dark and snow was falling. Meanwhile, in the heated train station, Aldo and Fix waited impatiently, peering through the windows for any sign of Fogg. Overnight, the snow turned into an all-out blizzard. By morning, everyone was preparing for the worst. Chattering chitter. There was no way Fogg and the soldiers could have survived the night. But suddenly, the thundering of horses' hooves echoed across the plain. Aldo rushed outside to see a group of mice on a horseback approaching the station through the heavy storm. Holy cheese! Leading the group was Fogg and Passepartout, sledding at full speed, everyone cheering and jumped for joy. Aldo gave Fogg and Passepartout enormous hugs, tears rolling down his snout. Even Fix found himself sniffling a little, though he did his best to hide it. Unfortunately, a few hours before Fogg and Passepartout had returned, the engine and cars had been reattached, and the train had left the station. Aldo had placed the conductor to wait, but he had to stick to the schedule and get the rest of the passengers to New York on time. When Passepartout heard this, his whiskers dropped and he slumped onto a bench. "Francis Ricotta," he groaned, burying his snout in his paws. "It's really over this time. We'll never win the bet now. The next train wouldn't come through until that evening." Fogg was already 8 hours behind. "Don't worry, Passepartout," Fogg said, calm as always. "We'll get our tails out of this twist too." Cheese niblets, Fogg was right again. Listening, Fogg squeaked. "Just then, I'm sure there's a way to get to New York in time." Aldo and Passepartout spun to look at him. "Dumbfounded. Last night I met a rodent who could help us." Fix continued. "Who?" asked Fogg, tapping his paw impatiently. Fix gave him a smile. "Follow me and I'll show you." A few hours later, they stood in front of an American
mouse named Mudge. He owned a strange ice boat and then cruised across the plains on 2 enormous skates. Mudge explains that the boat could get them to Omaha in less than 5 hours. From there they could find many different trains to New York, rat-munching rattlesnakes. It looks like they still had a chance, but they had to leave right away. Fogg didn't waste a second. Faster than the mouse and cheese hunt, the boat launched. Mudge was at the helm, and Fogg, Passepartout, and our order clung to the railing, bound up to their ears against the freezing cold. Thanks to the wind and Mudge's skills with his mouse boat, they arrived at Omaha right on time. Of course, Fogg paid Mudge handsomely for his help. Then he and his friends boarded the first train for New York. With any luck, they catch the ship China, which would finally bring them back to Europe. Pause crossed. Late again, Fogg and his friends arrived in New York at 11:15 at night on December the 11th. Unfortunately, the China had left 45 minutes earlier. They had just missed it. Rats. Fogg didn't care to squeak about it to Passepartout, but this time the situation was more serious than a shortage. The next boat wouldn't leave for England until December the 14th. Too late for Fogg to win the bet. They had to find another way.
Fogg walked all around the port, searching far and wide for a rodent who might be setting out for Europe. Just as he was about to throw his paws in the air and give up, he spotted a small mercantile ship ready to set sail, the Henrietta. Fogg scampered up to the ship and asked for the captain. An enormous rodent with long sideburns and withered snout came to meet him. "Are you the captain of the Henrietta?" asked Fogg. The captain nodded firmly. "Andrew Speedy in the fur." "I see you're leaving soon," Fogg said. "Are you going to England by any chance?" "Not unless I were chased by a pirate cat," responded the captain with a scowl. "I'm sailing for Bordeaux, France." Fogg nodded thoughtfully. "If I paid you well, would you bring me my 3 companions to Liverpool on your way?" "Do you have cheese in your ears?" the captain barked. "I told you I'm not going to England." Fogg knew that he was dealing with a tough mouse, but he didn't let the captain ruffle his fur. Instead, he made his best offer. "I'll give you $8,000 if you take us to Bordeaux with you." Cheese and crackers, that was all Captain Speedy needed to hear. He couldn't refuse. At 9 o'clock the next morning, Fogg and his friends headed out to the Atlantic Ocean aboard the Henrietta, but Fogg was at the helm. Since Captain Speedy didn't want to take them to Liverpool, Fogg had decided to take matters to his own paws. Thanks to a large stack of money, he had persuaded the crew to help him lock the captain in his cabin until they reached Liverpool. The desperate times called for desperate measures, and Fogg was determined to win his bet. Rancid ricotta, Captain Speedy was angrier than a wild cat in a cage. Even brave Passepartout avoided getting too close when he brought the captain his meals. The first part of the journey went smoothly, but the problems began on December the 16th. That morning the engineer scurried up to Mr. Fogg with a frown on his snout. "I hate to say this, sir, but we're running out of coal." Fogg didn't lose his cool, even for an instant. "How much do we have left?" he asked. "Only enough for more than 2 days." The engineer squeaked, tucking his whiskers. "Mouse-tastic," said Fogg with a smile. "Keep filling the furnace." Fogg was no fool. His mind was racing, trying to come up with another solution to the coal shortage. 2 days later, during the coal ran out for good, he sent Passepartout to bring Captain Speedy up to the deck. A few minutes later, the captain arrived snarling like a caged cat. He lunged at Fogg. "Thief, you stole my ship. I'll make you pay for this mutiny." Fogg didn't twitch a whisker. "Captain, I wanted to speak to you snout to snout because I'm hoping to buy the Henrietta. I could pay you $60,000. Captain Speedy was squeakless. $60,000? That could buy me 3 boats like the Henrietta. Suddenly calm, the captain turned to Fogg. "Well, I guess it's not a bad offer." Then Fogg clarified that he didn't actually want to buy the entire boat. He just wanted to buy parts that were made of wood. "I need to feed it to the boiler," he explained. "Instead of burning coal, we'll burn pieces of the Henrietta." Speedy agreed, and within a few minutes the boat looked like a carpenter's workshop. Every mouse was working his paws to cut off enough wood to keep the boiler running. Passepartout cut, sawed, and split wood so fast it seemed like his tail was on fire. Princess our order worked her paws off as well. Carrying wood to the furnace for 2 whole days, the Henrietta sailed at full speed on the wood they could find aboard. Finally, on December 20th, they spotted the coast of Ireland. Holy cheese, they were getting close, but close wasn't going to win them. In less than 24 hours, Fogg's time would be up. That would barely get them to Liverpool, never mind London. Even worse, there was nothing on board left to burn. As Fogg sat quietly, thinking about what to do, Captain Speedy hobbled up. "I'm sorry, Mr. Fogg,
But at this rate, we won't arrive in Liverpool in time. He pointed to a town along the coast and added, "That's the only part of Queenstown. It's still quite a journey to Liverpool." "Ah," responded Fogg quietly, tugging through out his whiskers, "so we'll get off at Queenstown." Fogg knew that trains departed every hour from Queenstown to Dublin. In Dublin, it would be easy to find a Roland to take them to Liverpool by boat. Maybe they still had a whisker of a chance in getting to London in time. At just after 1 o'clock in the morning, the Henrietta entered the port of the Queenstown. The ship was a metal carcass by now. Less than 30 minutes later, Fogg, Passepartout, Aouda, and Fix found themselves on a train to Dublin. They travelled all night, first by train, then by boat. At 11:45 the next day, December 21st, 1872, they set port in Liverpool. Holy cheese, they had 9 hours until time ran out on Fogg's bet. But it should only take 6 hours to get to London. Fogg could still win. Passepartout was squeakless with joy. But just when everything seemed to be looking up, something happened that caused his fur to stand on end. Fogg suddenly walked up to Fogg. Fix suddenly walked up to Fogg. "Are you Mr. Felix Fogg, sir?" It was hard to surprise Fogg, but that did it. He thought Fix had lost his cheese-loving mind. "Of course I am," he said with a frown. "You know me by now. We're friends." Fix gave him a stern look, then firmly ordered, "Follow me. You're under arrest." Behind bars. "I should have thrown him into the sea when I had the chance. Let the catfish have him. That's the end of the traitor. That's the end that the traitor deserves." Passepartout squeaked at the top of his lungs. The butler was angrier than a cat with fleas. When Fogg was arrested, Passepartout had tried his best to intervene, but Fix had called in reinforcements. Fogg was taken to jail. Passepartout had followed his boss along with the Princess Aouda, and now he had paced on shaky paws at the prison entrance. He tugged on his fur, boiling with rage. If he had Detective Fix in his paws, he would tie that Roland's tail in a knot. How could that rat play a trick like that on Fogg? Fogg always treated him like a guest. He tried, turning to Princess Aouda, who sat on a bench nearby, feeling sad and angry. Inside the building, locked in a cell, Fogg sat on a hard bed, staring quietly at bars in front of him. Any other Roland in this situation would be desperate, squeaking about his innocence so anyone who could listen. But Fogg seemed calm and cool as usual, almost as if nothing had happened. The clock struck 1. For a second, Fogg's whiskers twitched. If they had been on the train just then, they would have made it to London on time. But time kept ticking away, and all Fogg could do was stare at the walls. The clock struck 2 o'clock. Rat munching rattlesnakes. The bet would be over in 6 hours and 45 minutes. Fogg was going to lose. At this point, only a miracle could save him, and that's exactly what he got. Soon after the clock had chimed 2, Fogg heard a noise in the hallway. There were quick footsteps echoing and exciting voices squeaking. Fogg, who would know 2 of those voices anywhere, Passepartout and Aouda. Suddenly the cell door crashed open, and they were there. Behind them scampered Detective Fix, sweating and out of breath. Twisting his tails nervously, he cried, "Mr. Fogg, please forgive me." His mouth turned red as he added, "I made a terrible mistake. The true bank thief has already been in prison for 3 days. You're free." Fogg got to his paws without a word and walked to face Fix. Calm as ever, he squashed Fix's hat with one paw, wedging it down over the Roland's eyes. "Fabulous work, sir," cried Passepartout, laughing. Leaving poor Fix with his hat, the 3 friends scampered out of jail as fast as the paws could take them. Maybe there was another way to get to London in time. Within a few minutes, they reached the Liverpool station and checked the train scheduled to London. "I'm sorry," responded the ticketing agent. "The final train for London left 35 minutes ago. The next one isn't due to depart for a few hours." In a last-ditch effort, Fogg used every bit of his remaining money to have them prepare a special train for him immediately. When Fogg, Passepartout, and Aouda arrived in London and climbed off the station, every clock in the station read 8:50. Rats! Fogg lost the bet. After travelling around the world, Fogg was only 5 minutes late returning. Cheese niblets. He'd been so close. Passepartout couldn't believe it. After all, Fogg had missed winning by a whisker. The butler wrung his paws sadly. He felt as though it had been entirely his fault. Sunday, December 22, 1872, was a freezing cold day. It was the kind of day when residents of London walked around the city bundled in heavy coats or stayed warm inside their house. A familiar rodent stayed inside his house that day too, Felix Fogg. After arriving in the station that night before the 3 friends were straight to Fogg's house on Savile Road. Fogg got Aouda, settled in the guest room, and then silently padded to his own room. Passepartout said good night and then went to bed, his tail between his legs. The house on Savile Road looked exactly the same as when Fogg had left it. It seemed like nothing had changed, but instead 80 days had passed, and Felix Fogg was a ruined rodent. Fogg spent the entire day in his study staring at the window. Meanwhile, poor Passepartout was tearing out his fur with disappointment. He hovered near his boss, determined to do whatever he could to make Fogg feel better. But every time the butler came snap to snap up his boss, he couldn't even squeak. Both minds were heartbroken. "We have to do something for him," Princess Aouda whispered, pointing at Fogg from across the room. "He can't go on like this." "This isn't like him." "You're right, Princess," Passepartout said, shaking his snout sadly. "But you know that Mr. Fogg is a famously stubborn rodent. He'll never accept our help." After dinner that night, Fogg finally decided to squeak. "Passepartout, my friend," he asked kindly, "could you bring Princess Aouda in?" Passepartout didn't know why, but he suddenly felt happier than a mouse in a cheese factory. Aouda walked in Fogg's study, smiling. "I'm happy to see you wanted me." Fogg cleared his throat. "Princess Aouda, I want to ask you your forgiveness." Aouda looked at him. "But what is there to forgive?" "Moldy mozzarella, so many things," Fogg said with a sigh. "I made you risk your life many times on our journey to England," and he buried his snout in his paws. "And now that you're here, I can't offer you anything. I'm a ruined rodent." Hearing those words, Princess Aouda shook her snout. "Fearless, I will always be grateful for you bringing me to England." Then she shook her paw. "I will go gladly wherever you go." For the first time in his life, Fogg wasn't calm and collected. His snout turned red and he stammered, "I want to tell you that while I know, Fearless Fogg," Aouda squeaked. "I love you too." Without waiting for a response, she threw her arms around Fogg. When Passepartout peeked in the window for a few minutes later and saw them, he let out a joyful squeak. "Holy cheese!" the butler cried. Fogg and Aouda turned to see Passepartout in the door and laughed at the stunned, happy expression on his snout. "Hurry, Passepartout!" Fogg cried with a grin. "Run to Revelin Wilson. Tell him that Aouda and I want to get married tomorrow." Passepartout scurried out the door immediately. What a fabulous turn of events! At around 8:30, Aouda and Fogg sat in the front of the fireplace. There's a lot to organize before the wedding. Just then the front door flew open and Passepartout burst into the house like his tail was on fire. He fell to the ground exhausted. He was a complete mess. His clothes were disheveled, and his hat was missing, and he was totally out of breath. As soon as he could lift his paws, he squeaked, "The wedding's postponed. Reverend Wilson showed me his calendar." Fogg crouched down next to him, confused. "His calendar? What are you squeaking about?" "Tomorrow isn't Monday, the 23rd. It's Sunday, the 22nd, Passepartout cried. "Today is Saturday, December 21st. We arrived in London a whole day early." "We were wrong." Fogg leaped to his paws, "so I haven't lost a bit." Without even grabbing his hat, Fogg bolted out the door, followed by Passepartout. By 8:40, the two mice were racing along the streets of London towards the Reform Club and wagon. Cheese nibblets, they had only 5 minutes to get there. At the Reform Club, the other rodents involved in the bet sat around the fireplace, tapping their paws. "He'll never do it," said Andrew Stewart. "You're right, it's already 8:44, Gothic Wolf said. They all kept their eyes on the clock over the bar. Then second hand ticked along quickly. 10, 9, 8. Drops of sweat ran down the rodents' fur. They had almost won the bet. 3, 2, 1, slam! At the moment the door flew open and Phileas Fogg made his triumphant return to the Reform Club. At 8:45 on the dot on December 21st, he completed his Marvin Mouse trip around the world. How did he arrive at London a whole day earlier without realizing it? Simple. The Earth is divided into many segments like an orange. 360 segments to be exact. Traveling around the world from west to east, you gain 4 minutes for each segment you cross. Each time you cross the one segment, you must turn the hands of your clock back 4 minutes. By the end of a trip around the world, the clock will have moved back 24 full hours, 4 minutes for each of the 360 segments. That's how Fogg arrived one day early, mouse-tastically. Fogg completed his trip around the world and won £20,000 in the bet. Unfortunately, he had lost the same amount of money during his trip, so he came out even in the end. But Fogg had gained so much more on his Marvin Mouse journey, the experience of a lifetime, the love of a princess, and of a Marvin Mouse friend, Passepartout. It was a trip none of them would ever forget. Rodent's honor.